Carrying on from Alistair's videos, this is a U-type lock, London Midland region U-type lock, around about 15.5 ohms or 10 volts, 8 to 10 volts, nominally 12 volts pick. What we have is the main body of the electric lock itself, and we have the combined circuit controller bolted onto that. This is driven off a milled diagonal shaft and a cam and cog affair which sits just below here. At the top we have our terminal blocks, and traditionally the two in the middle are the coils R1 and R2, which lead down to these wires here. And then we have pairs of lock proving contacts which are here, which I'll just show you. Now these have been borrowed off here, but you can see the back ones are still there. So when the lock is engaged and dropped in, contacts make, as you can see, just there. Little spring leaf contacts on them. Care to be taken not to bend them. The pin that goes through from the yoke to the what we call a lock dog. Make sure the little split pins are actually in on it. They can come out and break. And the yoke is weighted itself. Turning our lock on our side, we can see that the lock dog has engaged fully into the lock. Now, what you can't appreciate, on the back of this is a triangular small piece of milled brass as part of the lock dog, and these act as force downs. And what happens on your rod, if I can get it to show, you can just see that round pin just there. That round pin that you can see, as it moves down, comes into contact with the triangular section and forces the lock in. So it'll actually drag that in tight. And that's a force down affair, because obviously this lock is mounted vertically, so there's no guarantee that the lock will drop in, so you're forcing it in. The weighting should drop down with gravity and force it in, but no guarantee on that. Also, to add to that, there's a spring just here. So you've got three methods of making sure that the lock actually does re-engage. The weighted part of the yoke, the spring, and the force down inside. All of these parts do come apart. One thing to be careful of when you take the screws out to get this all apart, there is small locating pins just here which tap down through the main body as well. And likewise on the circuit controller, when you take that apart, the bolts are all different lengths to account for the actual holes. This one's a bit shorter than this one. The actual main rod itself can either come pre-cut from the works, or you can cut that yourself. This here is a normal lock, normal to B jet lock. You can take this apart to cut that or to swap over. So if you've got an NBDR lock that's damaged and you need to reuse parts of another lock and you haven't got an NBDR slot spare, you would have to put all the pieces together. So you need to be aware of these little small locating pins that do drop in here, even more so on the circuit controllers, because that sets it the right way so you can't get it the wrong way. This is the cable aperture, where the cables come in through here, and we have some stop screws top and bottom. They set the limits of the lock rod as it moves. One other thing to mention on this, cables usually when they come in and out of here, spiral bind them, put them in protective sheaths so they don't get caught upon the rod. The rod should be kept clean. This one's slightly rusty because it's been in stores. On the circuit controllers, now depending on whether you get the new or the old ones, what happens here is there is a small screw that goes through from the opposite side to hold them in place. As you can see, this is one of the old ones. Zoom in on there. Get the light on it, there we go. Now as you can see, this screw has a washer. Behind the washer is an insulating washer, a small Bakelite washer, and then also through the centre of this, because you'll notice the screw is smaller than the holes, through the centre of this is a small straw made of Bakelite as well. You must have that and the straw, otherwise this will simply short out onto the bodywork. The newer ones have a pre-made little black plastic affair that actually fits all the way through there. It's the straw and the washer in one on the newer ones, but these are the older ones. They have the separate Bakelite washer and Bakelite straw. Your lever bands in times of old, what you did used to happen is that people would turn a normal lever band by swapping it round to make it a reverse, and you can make an NA to an RE, sorry, there's loads of different ways around it. Nowadays you use the correct lever band, and it is actually marked upon it. You can't really see it there, that's an N to C, normal to centre one. So at some point this has probably been used on the ground frame. They are all slightly different on their segments. I do have a plan of the segments, which I'll show you later, so you can see all the different variations upon them. And if this lets me do this and show you it rotating, there's the shaft rotating, has a limited amount of motion. You can, if you overcut the stroke on these, overstroke these so that they actually jam up. We have had that in the past, but they should be cut to a preset dimension. As mentioned just previously, this is the underside of the circuit controller, and you can see here this is the slot in which the drive train is here. This drive train that's part of the main locking rod. This comes out, this is screwed in as well, 2 screws and a locating pin at either end, so you can't get it the wrong way around as well. That sits in here, and that slot that you can see there then acts upon this spindle, which is fully rotatable, and then that starts to turn the circuit controller. It does have a limit on it, and its limit is set by the end of the cogs. So when I said if you overcut your lock, you can affect the stroke on this and affect its operation, that can happen, so you've got to be very careful on that. As you can see here, here's one of the locating pins, and we have our 4 screw holes, our other locating pin there as well. So they are handed, so you can't get them the wrong way round. So you have to get them the right way round. They come in various sizes to depend upon what you require. 4 ways, 8 ways, 16 ways, etc, etc. There is a little locating pin there to stop it coming out, and what you'll also notice is, and that's probably the easier job, is you take the contact stacks off by removing the screw, get them out, and then you can get cleanly at your economizers, having taken the fuse out first so you don't go blowing everything, because everything will be tightly in there. These contact stacks do have a very slight spring on the back to hold them in place, which you can just see here, and if you notice, some of them do not sit exactly level. That's because at some point someone has adjusted them, and this is where you get some of your problems from. Some of the newer contacts as well, they have a slightly smaller head than the older ones and sit just off the end of the contacts if you're not careful, almost like that, instead of being quite on the contact like that. So you've got to be careful of that. These are all oilite, you don't oil these in any way. The brass, they should be kept clean. Some of the older ones, more copper, and you can get this, you can get a lot of carbonisation. It's like that, quite badly carbonised that is. And also what you can get is you can get a wear pattern forming on the end, especially if you've got one that's just sitting on the end all the time. And unfortunately none of these are, so I can't really show you one of those. But that's where it will start. It will start there with a little tiny bit of a lip starting to form if you're not careful. So you should look out for these things as well. Here's one of our stamp marks. So this is an RE band. So you can tell which one that is on that type. Don't know if I can rotate these all the way to show you. Ah, there you go, there's an NA, and there's an NA band. So there's the NA. Now if you understand the NA and REs, if you don't, I'll explain it very simply. If you imagine the lever in normal, that is in the normal, that's the N position. If you then take the lever to the reverse, that's the R position. In the centre, it'll be in the C for centre, so N, C and R. And likewise, you will have positions just out the lock in the reverse, which is the reverse to the E position, and just out the lock in the normal, it's the N to the A position. And those contacts, the NAs and the REs, are to keep your electric lock energised while you're undoing the lever. If it was just a normal lock, when you pick your lock, as soon as you move the lock, it'll drop again, and you'll never get it out. So the NAs and the REs will keep them just past the lock until you've cleared that rod just enough, and then the lock drops back in. This is our H-type lock. This is a different one. So if you imagine the U's we saw before, mostly upright, this one's horizontally, roof mounted. These are the two bolt holes that mount it through to your roof timbers or your metal straps that hold it. And we also again have our ability to mount a circuit controller on top should we need to. We've already covered that, so we won't go into that. Basically on this one, again, we can see we have our forcing studs. We have a slight bit of a yoke weight, more for the magnetism of the coils than for actually returning the LCCs in place. This one's disconnected so you can see into it. The pin's been removed out of here. And we have our driving head at this end, which isn't drilled. So this will sit with that just in there and a pin underneath it, so it'll be free to move. We have our LCCs, our lock checking or proving contacts, one on the left hand side, one on the right hand side again. And as you can see on this one, we have our notches cut out. So on this one, a normal notch, and then we've got the rest of this free here to the reverse. One thing again to mention is this hole appears on various lock types. This is a checking hole, and it should line up when it's in the normal with this hole here. I can't move this one unfortunately because it's been cannibalised, but you can then use that with a small pin to check on it. If you get these brand new from the works, they actually come with a securing pin in it to stop this rod moving. That pin's very handy to keep, put in your keychain and use that as a checking pin. These ones, ironically, though there's less in them, are a bit harder to take apart than the previous ones, just purely because of the continual casting and everything that's there. You have to take a lot of pieces apart to get it apart. One thing we do find a lot of wear on these, the LCCs. So here we see the middle of rowy type U lock mounted correctly on its mounting bars. This is a BR standard design. Down to the feet there. We have the lower rack for mounting our scale beams, as I call them, on our rocking cranks, so we can operate our signals and points. We have our small adjustable drive that we can operate and set the lock off that, circuit controller, and then we have our lock itself. You'll notice this hasn't got a lock on this one, it's just got a circuit controller, so it has a blanking plate attached to that. And you can see on this one our lock proving and checking contacts are made here. One of the things with setting these up is that 1/4 turn, 1/2 turn is enough to set the lock position on the lock itself. Any more and you actually force it against the lock, so you've got to be careful on that one. And also notice these are mounted underneath. There are some that are mounted above because you have a drive pin from the top as well. If the lock is driven from the top, the locks tend to be down here on the ground level. And one thing you've got to be aware of there is oil pouring down will go into the lock. So what we do on them, we wrap a bit of scrim above on the actual bar where it comes down onto that to stop oil pouring down from the levers into that. Now, I did mention about the lever band setting positions, and we do have some crib sheets with some extra information on this should anyone really be interested. That includes how to take the electric lock apart and the dimensions of the actual lever bands themselves. If you email us, we'll get them off to you. Thank you.